Hello everyone, welcome in. In this video, we will be discussing reasonable doubt and the evidence against Alexee. We are currently waiting on a decision from the judge about what evidence will be used at trial. I have seen those who support Alexee online, as well as her attorney, make assertions and claims of Alexee's innocence, and in this video, we will break down some of those arguments. These arguments are being made because supporters and the defense know these pieces of evidence will be allowed in and are undeniable, so they're trying to cause doubt. Reasonable doubt is the highest standard for evidence in a criminal trial and must be satisfied in order to convict. Evidence comes in different levels such as none, scintilla, reasonable suspicion, probable cause, preponderance, clear and convincing, and then reasonable doubt. To get a conviction on a criminal charge, a prosecution must convince a jury beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant is guilty, which means just having a reasonable doubt still does not conclude in a guilty verdict. Now, beyond a reasonable doubt is a concept in the law, not a solid fact, and it looks different in every single case, and it also looks different to every single juror. The defense and those who support her online are doing their best to try and find reasonable doubt and say that the murder charge is an overreach. The only issue is none of their doubt is reasonable. We are waiting on the judge to make a final decision on the evidence, so let's begin with the two arguments I see most based on the evidence we all know will be allowed in: the autopsy and the fact that baby Alex was in a bag. Now, the points of doubt I have seen from either Gary or the avid Alexee supporters online are as follows. Number 1, the argument of morphine caused the baby to not breathe or appear stillborn and not be breathing. The defense has claimed the hospital administering morphine to Alexee caused breathing issues in the baby. Many experts and attorneys have spoken up at this point about how the defense will have a hard time with this claim, and that no serious board-certified expert can honestly testify to that fact. With that being said, we know Alexee's expert witness tasked with making this claim, and based on his history, we can assume he has no problem making claims contrary to science. Shamelessly, in my opinion. I won't get into that too much here. If you're interested and haven't seen it, I do have a video detailing Alexee's expert's past and how he retired embarrassment and so on and so on. And you can find that on my channel. He does also lead to a lot of guilty convictions, so even his bought testimony, it does not appear the jury buys it. So with that, we can assume he's not going to be convincing in Alexee's trial, especially when the state can have their own experts and medical examiner refute his claims. You will notice the supporters of Alexee, as well as her attorney, never mention the drug that was in baby Alex's system 22 times more than the morphine, a drug that is indeed contraindicated for women, pregnant women or breastfeeding women, which is phentermine. If the defense wants to argue that anything suppressed the baby's breathing, it could have been the drug found, again, 22 times more than the morphine in the baby's system. Past the morphine, the phentermine speaks to Alexee's premeditation. Although you cannot say getting off of birth control and starting diet pills directly proves Alexee knew she was pregnant, it will definitely make some jurors think that. The only explanation from the defense would have to be that Alexee assumed the birth control was making her fat, so she stopped taking it and got on diet pills. I'll talk more about the diet pills in a video where I talk about what the state can ask Rosa while she's on the stand to fill in the gaps of time and questions that we'd like to ask Alexee, but we all know she will not be taking the stand, and how those things will lead to the deception and premeditation. But back to the diet pills, it will have to be explained as to why she started them, either by Rosa or the state's going to get to pontificate and lead the jury to believe it indicates Alexee's intent to conceal this pregnancy. And obviously that's not good for the defense. Alright, the next argument I often see is that the CT/MRI machine cannot accurately show air in the lungs and stomach, and essentially that since there was no float test of the lungs, that the air will be disproven. This is patently false. CT scans are commonly used to and are accurate in locating air in the lungs and other organs. To say that the autopsy was based off guesswork or that there was doubt behind the ability to find air in the lungs is disingenuous, and it's not enough for reasonable doubt once you see air is clearly definable on these scans. You can see by the photo I attached here, air is trapped where the arrow is pointing. An arrow appears darker on CT scans. So to think that it will be hard to find on the photos that it will be similar to this and shown to the jury, that's just not an easy sell. They have to not believe their eyes or to doubt the medical examiner's ability to find air in the lungs, both of which are extremely unlikely. There is a float test that could have been done, like I said, and on traditional under the knife autopsies that does happen, but Just because it did not happen in this case does not mean there's enough reasonable doubt around the fact of air being in the lungs. Okay, the next one is that the autopsy is based off the witness statements and that the entrapment finding is concluded because the witnesses said the baby was in the bag. I've seen this quite a bit, and they say that the medical examiner based the cause of death off the witness statements, therefore it's some sort of assumption or guesswork as to the entrapment finding. This is, again, patently false. Of course, medical examiners can use and observe witness statements, but those are not a determining factor in the autopsy. The findings of the autopsy were supported by witness statements, not found because of them. This fallacy behind this argument is what's called a hasty generalization when it comes to logic. You cannot generalize the idea that because witnesses said the baby was in a bag, that is a deciding factor in the cause of death to any significant degree. It's a generalization at best and a desperate ploy at worst. The next argument is that Alexee did CPR to try and explain the air in the lungs. This is probably the stupidest argument that the defense could pose on Alexee's behalf, and there's a few reasons. It makes no sense to try and resuscitate a baby and then throw it in the trash. This argument also gets you into what's considered an innocence paradox. That's when you have an answer for every single fact, and the harder you protest, the less innocent you seem to the jury. And since one of those answers is likely a lie, it opens you up to what's called exposure in the courtroom, the possibility of a loss. And the opposing side can catch you in that lie or infer it's untrue, therefore undermining you in front of the jury. Even defendants who are found not guilty have unexplained facts in their trial, and sometimes that works to their favor. So it would be really short-sighted and almost ensure a guilty verdict should Alexee try to say that she did CPR. It would easily be refuted and definitely expose her. Now, past the autopsy, the other thing I've seen argued is the trash bags. That the baby was not twisted the bag was not twisted around the baby, and that Alexee did not put a fresh liner over the can. Gary has never referred to the baby being in a trash bag, not in motions, interviews, or hearings. He has been able to dance around that statement, but in court he will have what he says about 4 weeks of the state constantly referring to the baby being found in a bag, and Gary finding other ways to say the same statement. And eventually that will get very obvious to the jury. It will start to show them that he is trying to distance himself from the truth. The baby being twisted in a bag with the end wrapped underneath the weight of the baby is an undeniable fact multiple witnesses have stated, and I have about 2 whole minutes, I believe, of testimony to that fact that I will play now.
She put the baby in the trash can, and then she put another clean liner over the top of it. Okay. So when they looked in there, there was no trash in there, but it was underneath the clean bag. The baby's going, like I said, he was in the trash one, wrapped up with paper towels underneath that. So I pulled that out of the way to get him out so we could check on it.
Right. So was the baby wrapped in the plastic as well?
Yeah, it was in the trash. See, we pulled it apart.
Okay.
To get to the baby, because we had to check on it.
Right.
So she put it in the trash, and then it wrapped up, and it was in the bottom with this brand new plastic trash bag over it.
Oh, okay.
See what I'm saying?
Yeah, I got you. Yeah, I just want to see if it was actually if the baby was in the bag
Yes,
itself.
the baby was in the trash bag.
Okay.
She
Yeah.
put it right in the. See, you can see all that stuff is from the trash that was in that ER.
Right.
And she put him in there, and then she put a new one over the top where you couldn't see it.
Okay.
And the only reason we found them is because when she went to pull the trash, she goes, "This is awful heavy."
And when I picked up the trash, I thought it was heavy. And so I started looking in there, and on the very bottom, she had it covered with some toilet paper. And that's when I called Lori and told her to come and look.
Okay. So did you look inside of it at all or anything like that?
Yeah, I looked inside of it, and there's where I seen something, on the very bottom of the toilet paper that covered it up in a plastic bag.
Okay. When you looked at it, did you see that it was a baby, or what did you think? You knew already? Okay.
And the baby, when I looked at it, the baby was wrapped up like in a, like at the bottom of the trash can, and with trash on top of it, in a trash bag.
And so how did you see it, as soon as you picked it up?
No, after I picked up the trash bag that was on top,
Okay,
where
so
they were throwing the trash at, when I picked that up to change it, that's when I noticed that there was, when I seen the baby.
Okay, so you left the liner and then saw
Yeah.
the baby, okay.
So she goes, something's in the trash can. I'm like, I looked in there, there's a clean liner. I'm like, what are you talking about? She goes, pick it up. I picked it, I could feel the weight. I knew then we had a serious problem. I just grabbed the trash can and went right across the hall. There's trauma 2. The liner was pulled out, but there was another trash bag in there in the bottom, but it was all it was rolled up. So I had to tear it apart. And then, of course, I saw the baby in there.
So, the housekeeper's statements will all be allowed in, and her testimony is vital. With that being said, she was clear about the baby being in a bag, twisted up, put underneath. This is where the defense loses its legs. They are essentially working with what I call a Wizard of Oz strategy. If you've never seen it, spoiler alert, a woman is walked down a yellow brick road by fantastical characters in a make-believe world, all concocted by a man behind a curtain. At the very end, his secret is exposed when the woman's dog bites the curtain and pulls it back, revealing the man behind it all. Throughout this trial, the baby being in that bag is what Gary is going to try to keep hidden behind the curtain, right? And the state is going to keep pulling it back and exposing it, because as much as Gary can try and blame it on anyone and everyone else, the only person who put the baby in the bag was Alexee. So, with all this being said, I'm assuming the judge's decision on the evidence will be unsealed, and we're going to get to read her decision together, and we'll have a much better idea of just how this trial is going to go. I do have a few predictions as far as the evidence goes from my research. I believe the judge will suppress all statements made to hospital staff before the crime took place or before the initial act, as most of that will be covered by privilege. From there, we have the video where Alexee runs down the hall. The judge already indicated that the hallway video will be admitted as evidence, and I don't see a valid reason for it not to be allowed in, so we can bet on that being allowed in. I believe certain statements that are weaved in and out of HT's initial conversation with the police will be suppressed, ones that talk about anything before the crime took place, because again, that is technically privileged. I believe once the doctors and the police enter Alexee's room, all of that will be allowed in. We covered this when we discussed the State versus Lucero case. Alexee seeing the police and not asking them to leave and offering statements is all her own fault. She was never questioned and she was never under arrest, so she never needed to be Mirandized. She offered statements prior to being told that she could not go, and all of that's going to be allowed in. So we have the statement Alexee made when exiting the bathroom, which I do not believe will be subject to privilege, where she says that she is on her period to explain all of the blood on the floor. I think that is going to be a very telling statement for the jury as far as Alexee's desire to distract people from finding the baby or looking for the baby in general. That statement, as well as the fresh liner, shows Alexee's intent so vividly. We don't need much else, but I am excited to share with you when we do find out all the evidence that will be allowed in. Again, these are just my lowly paralegal opinions, but if you have made it this far in the video, thank you so much for watching. If you're interested in following this case all the way to trial, please subscribe, because I will be covering this case with the legal bent every step along the way. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, please put them down below, and I'll try to respond as soon as possible, because I do love the conversation and talking with all of you. So please do not be hesitant to voice your opinion, thoughts, or feelings. I will see you in the next video. It's your girl Friday. Thank you so much. Okay, bye.